Hey, this is Dean, and it's week 5. And if this is week 5, then that means we are studying chapter 5, which is about ancient Rome. So chapters 3 and 5 cover similar sorts of a time period. You may remember that ancient Greece comes into the historical record in the 8th century BCE with Homer's epics. And the traditional founding date for ancient Rome is in the 750s BCE. So basically, we're going to follow a similar sort of period with the Roman Empire as we did with ancient Greece. Ancient Rome first begins as a kingdom that's ruled by the Etruscans, and under them are the Roman people. That lasts for about 250 years, which is then followed by the Roman Republic, a republic in which various democratic institutions are established, and that actually lasts for about 500 years, which is then followed by an empire. The Roman Empire is a period of time in which Rome expands beyond the Mediterranean, particularly into Europe and as far as Britannia, or Great Britain. Empire lasts for 500 years. And then actually the western half of the empire falls. But the eastern half, which historians call the Byzantine Empire, is going to last for another 1,000 years. So amazingly enough, the Roman Empire in some form, republic, kingdom, empire, lasts for 2,200 years. So you can imagine why it is that subsequent leaders who are hell-bent on creating some kind of great empire would look back to ancient Rome as some kind of a model on how to create an empire, how to maintain an empire, and how to grow an empire. Some vocabulary words for you. Dictator. Cincinnati, as in Cincinnati, Ohio. Triumph. Rubicon, as in crossing the Rubicon. Forum. Plebe or plebeian. Caesar. Triumvirate. Gladiator, and Brutus. So these are all words that are still used today on a regular basis in English, that all are associated with ancient Rome. And I want to talk about just one of those right now, and that is the source for Cincinnati, Ohio, and that is Cincinnatus. So I want to talk about two individuals, Cincinnatus and then another individual, to kind of help us bracket these two kind of major periods in ancient Roman history, the Republic and then the Empire. In your textbook, there is a picture of a statue of Cincinnatus that can be found on page 150. Cincinnatus, the individual who Cincinnati is named after. And he's this great example of the citizen leader, the citizen king, the citizen ruler. Individual who has obligations both as a citizen and as a member of a state, a nation. So Cincinnatus, before he was age of 60, was elected consul of the Roman Republic. Consul, there were two of them in the Republic, and they were basically the executives, like today's president, executives of the Roman Republic. That's a year-long office. He finishes his work as consul and goes back to his farm. And so he's plowing his farm one day, and the members of the Roman Senate come up to him and tell him that Rome is under siege, it's at war, and they need him to put down his plow and come to Rome and defend the city. So, being a good member of the state, a good citizen, puts his plow down, travels to Rome, conscripts a bunch of Romans, and puts down the siege, ends the siege, saves Rome from its enemies. Now let me back up here just a second, because I missed an important point. What gave Cincinnatus the ability to do this is because the Senate asked him to be a dictator. So today we have negative connotations of the word dictator. But back then, actually, the dictator was an official office of the government of the Roman Republic. A dictator was basically someone who was brought in for 6 months during a time of crisis when ancient Rome was at threat, and this person had total power. The idea is you needed total power to get rid of the threat. And so since Cincinnatus comes in, he's given the office for 6 months. Within 2 weeks, though, he puts down the siege, saves Rome, and instead of taking advantage of that role as 6-month dictator with total power, after 15 days, he resigns. 20 years later, the same thing happens again. Right? There's another threat in Rome. At the age of 80, right, he becomes the dictator again, and soon after fulfilling his duties, he resigns his office. Now you can imagine how the word dictator would take on negative connotations. I mean, you can certainly imagine individuals taking advantage of an office in which you have total power. But Cincinnatus is this kind of model citizen king who understands that he has obligations to the state as a citizen, but in no way is a greedy individual who's going to take advantage of the responsibilities that the state can give him. Right? He doesn't take advantage of being a dictator and whatever, increase his land size, give him some more money, whatever it may be. Doesn't take advantage of it. Fulfills his duty, gives up the position. As I said, great example of that citizen ruler kind of idea. Second person I want to talk about is Caligula. If you know anything about Roman history, you probably heard that name before. Caligula actually isn't named in our textbook. Interestingly, his predecessor is named, his successor is named, but Caligula isn't named. And one of the most infamous emperors of the Roman Empire. Only serves for 4 years, and he comes in at the age of 25 in the late 30s, just 20 years or so after Augustus passes on. And he has a really good first 6 months. Then he gets sick. Some individuals say he might have been poisoned, and from then on, people say that he just goes insane. He's a sexual libertine, right? Prefers various kinds of perverse sex. Supposedly has incestuous sex with his sisters, preys on the wives and girlfriends of friends and enemies. He's at a gladiatorial fight one day, gets bored to death, and so decides to have a whole section of the arena, the audience in that whole section, thrown into the middle of the ring for the animals to maim and kill them. Individual who believed that he was a god, right, such that he felt that he could name his favorite horse Incitatus to be consul. Right? There's no record that actually followed through on that, but the claim is that this is something they wanted to do and tried to do. Felt that he was a god, and so in the year 41 decides that he's going to move to Alexandria in Egypt, right, so that he can be like a pharaoh and be worshipped as a god by the people. This is kind of the final step for the members of the Senate, and he's actually assassinated. The first Roman emperor to be assassinated. Definitely not the last, but his demise sets up this model for getting rid of bad emperors. So 2 individuals to kind of bracket important period of time that we'll be covering: the Roman Republic, that kind of democratic period, and the Roman Empire, more autocratic period. And Cincinnatus represents kind of this ideal form of republic leadership, and Caligula exemplifies the worst of an empire, an individual who doesn't take his obligations seriously and takes advantage of his station, of his position. Had a student ask me about dates and chronology. So if you were to read a source from ancient Rome, you would never read something like this. in the year 150 BCE, X, Y, and Z happened. Or in the year 30 AD, X, Y, and Z happened. Of course, that system of BC and AD hadn't been created yet. What you would find in a Republican source, in a Roman source or Greek source, would be something along the lines of, in the year of Consul Tiberius, in the 20th year of Consul Tiberius, X, Y, and Z happened. Or in the 10th year of the reign of Augustus, X, Y, and Z happened. So basically they kept relative track of time by basing it on the reign year of an emperor or a consul or some important individual. So it's not going to be until the 6th century CE when a Christian monk decides that human history needs to be split into two, and that the pivot point is going to be the birth of Christ. Alright, so all time before the birth of the Christ is going to be BC, before Christ, and all time after the birth of Christ is going to be AD, Anno Domini. So if you took high school history, you probably came across a textbook that used that system of BC and AD. Pretty common. But our textbook doesn't use that. It uses BCE and CE. BCE standing for before the Common Era, and CE standing for the Common Era. And the idea was that a couple years ago, historians and other individuals decided that maybe they needed a time system that wasn't quite so Western, wasn't quite so Christocentric, so Christian. So yes, they kept that kind of traditional date of the birth of Christ as year 0, the kind of pivot point between the two eras. But they give it a different name. So I prefer to use the BCE CE system as opposed to the BC AD system because it is more religiously and culturally neutral. This is a discussion week, so we have our 2 discussion boards. The first one asks you about the morality of gladiator fights. Are those crazy Romans enjoying their gladiator fights? Are they uncivilized? Are they immoral individuals? And then the second discussion board has to do with Roman power and the signs, the symbols, the evidence of Roman power. So enjoy those 2 discussions and of course the regular quiz, and see you in the DBs.